El subjuntivo por junio. ¿Qué es el subjuntivo? We use the subjunctive to describe things that may or may not happen. Additionally, we can use the acronym WEIRDOS for when to use the subjunctive. WEIRDOS stands for wishes, emotion, impersonal observations, recommendations, doubt, and ojalá que. Hay tres pasos para crear el subjuntivo. They are 1. The setup words, 2. Inserting the word que, and 3. The subject change. 1. Setup words. These words used in the first clause of a sentence set up the use of the subjunctive in the second clause. What is said after these words may or may not happen, so the conjugation of the second verb is not the present tense as you know it. These setup verbs include querer, sugerir, recomendar, insistir, esperar, and ojalá que. It is important to remember that the setup words being in the first clause are conjugated differently than the words in the second clause. The words in the first clause are conjugated in the present tense as you know it. Ahora, el segundo paso para crear el subjuntivo es fácil. Solo tienen que añadir la palabra que. Por último, el paso más importante, the subject change. If there is no subject change, then there is no subjunctive. This is when you need to know how to form the subjunctive. Subjuntivo en el contexto. Mi madre quiere que pongamos la mesa. Now let's explain the sentence in context to the subjunctive. We know that quiere is the setup word of this sentence because it is written in the present tense. Next, it is very obvious where the que part of this sentence is, coming right after the setup word. Finally, you can see that pongamos is the verb that signifies the change in subject of this sentence, because now we are talking about we setting the table, whereas in the beginning of the sentence we were talking about mi madre, signifying a change in subject. Lo último que vamos a hablar hoy es la creación de los verbos en el subjuntivo. Hay 4 versiones de conjugar el subjuntivo. 1. The basics. 2. Stem changing. 3. Spelling changes. 4. Irregular verbs. Para conjugar los verbos básicos en el subjuntivo, siga estos pasos. Primero, use the yo form of the verb in the present tense. Hablo como vivo. Next, drop the o. So drop the o in hablo, como, and vivo. Lastly, add an opposite ending. This means for the AR verbs, you use ER endings, and for ER/IR verbs, you use AR endings. So for example, hablar, which is usually an AR verb, is now replaced with the conjugation for an ER verb, and comer, which is usually an ER verb, is replaced with the conjugation of an AR verb. And same goes for vivir. Now here on this slide is a visual showing how to conjugate the basic verbs, just like I did on the previous slide. As you can see, in the AR verbs, like hablar, like in the previous slide, the yo form turns into at the end. And then vice versa, for ER/IR verbs, you have a, because you're switching that to the opposite ending. To conjugate stem-changing verbs to the subjunctive, here, let's take a look. We have a verb like divertirse, which we know that it's a stem changer right here. And we're going to add that I in the middle, right? So when you come down here, it's basically the same thing as earlier with the basics. So let's do the steps that we were talking about earlier with divertirse. So if we have me divierto, That's in the present tense if you want to say that. And then with our rules, we're going to drop the O and add the opposite ending. So since it's divertirse, you have that A, which signifies the ER verb. And so then we're going to change it to an AR verb, and it's now going to be me divierta. And look at that. That's where it is right here. Now we've learned this with other conjugations before, but there are words that end with gar, car, and zar, and these are going to have spelling changes in the present subjunctive in order to maintain that pronunciation. And in the next slide, we're going to take a look at examples of these. So let's take a look at pagar. This is an example of a gar verb ending, and so when you look at the conjugation right here, you have page. Now, why do we have that? We have that so that it can maintain that g sound in the conjugation of the subjunctive. And then over here we have bostezar, which is our ZAR ending. And now here it's a little bit less intuitive. If you can see that you conjugate it so the ending of it has the se, so it sounds like the bostese. You still have that z kind of sounding in it. And finally we have clasificar, which, as you can guess, is our example for the CAR ending. Now here, in order to maintain that car sound, for the conjugating, you have K at the end, so clasifique, to maintain that pronunciation. Finalmente, vamos a hablar de los verbos irregulares. Algunos de estos incluyen los verbos ser, estar, ir, dar y saber. Desafortunadamente, debemos recordar las terminaciones irregulares, pero usamos las mismas reglas que antes para conjugar el subjuntivo. Por ejemplo, take the verb ir. We know, just by looking at it, that it has an IR ending. Even though when it changes, it's quite irregular, we still do follow the rules of conjugating the subjunctive. It's an IR-ER verb, yet it's dropping the O and adding the AR conjugation.